Morning. The 35th floor boardroom of a global corporation in New York City. A multi-billion-dollar international contract is on the line. The atmosphere is suffocating. High-level executives stare at a massive screen where a foreign partner is speaking. A professional translator interprets. They are unwilling to proceed under the current terms. The CEO's face goes cold. The deal is dying. In the corner, a man is quietly mopping the floor. Nathan Cole, a 42-year-old janitor. He stops. He looks up. He says 6 words that freeze the room. That's not what he actually said. Watch. Truth starts here. Stand by. Now. Believe her. Listen. Nathan Cole was a man of steel, silence, and absolute rhythmic routine. At 42, his face was a map of quiet focus and the deep, enduring weariness of a man who worked 2 lives, one to keep the physical world clean and one to keep a small home safe. He was a contract custodial worker for Vanguard Global, a position he had held for 3 years. In an industry fueled by screaming egos and late-night posturing, Nathan was the quiet. He was the one who arrived at 4 a.m., buffed the marble floors until they reflected the city's ambition, and vanished into the service corridors before the first cup of executive coffee was poured. He understood the language of silence, the way a building breathes before the storm of a business day begins. To the younger, more aggressive managers, Nathan was essentially invisible. He was a utility, not a person. They saw a man in a navy blue uniform with a name tag that they never bothered to read. They assumed he lacked ambition because he never looked up from his mop or asked for a promotion. They didn't see the man who spent his afternoons at the public library, reading complex books on linguistics, international law, and socioeconomic structures. They didn't see the man who had learned that the most important deliverable of the day wasn't a polished desk, but a bedtime story told in a soft, steady voice to his daughter. They saw the uniform, but they were blind to the architect of integrity standing right in front of them. Nathan was a single father to 10-year-old Ivy. 5 years ago, his world had been surgically hollowed out when his wife, Sarah, passed away. Since that day, Nathan had systematically dismantled his old life. He had been a high-level communications coordinator for an international NGO, traveling to 3 continents a month to bridge the gap between war-torn regions and global aid. He had negotiated in basements and bunkers. But Sarah's death taught him that time was a currency that could never be earned back. He walked away from the high-pressure meetings and the global summits. He chose the janitorial role specifically because it allowed him to be the father who was always at the school gate at 3 p.m. He didn't need a corner office. He needed to be a hero in a small, warm apartment filled with Lego sets and school projects. He had traded the adrenaline of power for the sanctuary of presence. His resume, if anyone in the building had bothered to check the HR archives, was a masterpiece of hidden expertise. He was fluent in 3 languages and had a deep, intuitive understanding of cross-cultural negotiation. He understood the logic of silence, the way a person's breath and tone often carry more weight than the literal words they choose. But Nathan was content with his camouflage. He liked the honesty of manual labor. Unlike the people in the boardroom, the floors didn't lie to him. The glass didn't hide its flaws behind corporate jargon. He found peace in the rhythmic motion of the mop, a meditation that kept the ghosts of his past at bay. On this particular morning, the 35th floor was a pressure cooker. The Horizon Project, a massive infrastructure deal with an East Asian conglomerate, was at a terminal deadlock. The CEO, Victoria Langford, was under immense pressure from the board. She was a woman of data and logic, but she was losing her grip on the human element of the negotiation. She was young, brilliant, and terrified of failing the legacy her father had left her. She relied entirely on her lead translator, a man named Marcus who prided himself on his directness and his Ivy League credentials. Marcus saw words as weapons. Nathan saw them as bridges. Nathan was in the room to handle a coffee spill near the window. He was a ghost in the background, his mop moving in perfect, silent circles. He heard the partner on the screen speaking. He heard the specific, hesitant cadence of the man's voice. He recognized the regional accent. It was from a province where no is never spoken directly, But yes is often whispered through a request for more time. He heard Marcus translate that hesitation into a hard, final no. Nathan realized that Marcus was translating the dictionary, but he was missing the heart. He saw the deal, a deal that would protect thousands of jobs and build schools across 3 countries, slipping into a grave because of a missing nuance. The air in the room felt heavy, and for the first time in 5 years, Nathan felt the urge to put down the mop and pick up the bridge. In a real-world system, the person with the most valuable answer is often the one we choose to ignore because they don't fit the image of success. We measure intelligence by titles, forgetting that true mastery is earned through listening, not just talking. Very often, the most profound insights come from the people who are actually watching while everyone else is performing. The quietest person in the room is often the one hearing the most. The silence in the boardroom after Marcus's translation was thick, heavy, and entirely wrong. It was the kind of silence that precedes a collapse. Victoria Langford stood up, her hand hovering over the end call button on the conference terminal. She looked defeated. She believed the partners had slammed the door shut on 3 years of her life. She was already calculating the PR damage, the plummeting stock prices, and the layoffs that would inevitably follow a failed negotiation. To her, this wasn't just a lost contract, it was proof that she wasn't her father. "Then we have nothing left to discuss," Victoria said, her voice brittle and cold. "If they are unwilling to proceed under these parameters, we'll see them in arbitration. We are finished here." Marcus, the translator, gave a sharp, confident nod. He adjusted his silk tie and glasses, looking at the board members as if he had just performed a masterstroke of clarity. "I'm sorry, Victoria. They are being stubborn. It's a cultural refusal of the liability clause. They won't budge. They are simply not the partners we thought they were. It's better to cut our losses now." Nathan Cole stopped mopping. He stood near the back of the mahogany table, the scent of lemon-scented cleaning fluid lingering in the air. He looked at the screen. He saw the partner, Mr. Tanaka, leaning back. Tanaka's hands weren't clenched. His eyebrows weren't furrowed in anger. Instead, he was looking at Victoria with a soft, expectant, and slightly confused gaze. The gaze of a man waiting for a counteroffer or a sign of understanding, not a man ending a war. He looked like a teacher waiting for a student to finally catch the hint. Nathan realized that Marcus had translated the verb proceed as a definitive rejection of the entire project. But in that specific regional dialect, and given the man's rhythmic pauses and the way he touched his lapel, it wasn't a rejection of the project. It was a signal of a temporary pause due to a lack of internal consensus on a single, minor labor safety detail. He was asking for a reason to trust Victoria's firm, not a reason to leave it. Marcus was translating the ego. Nathan was translating the anxiety. The difference was microscopic to a computer, but catastrophic to a business. One translated sentence was about to destroy a 3-year partnership and thousands of potential futures. Victoria's finger was a millimeter from the button. The board members were already closing their laptops with finality, their faces mass of disappointment and blame. Nathan felt a surge of a feeling he hadn't felt in 5 years. Professional responsibility. He thought about the thousands of families whose livelihoods depended on this contract. He thought about Ivy's lesson on standing up for the truth that they had talked about over breakfast. He realized that his camouflage of invisibility was no longer worth the cost of a lie. He didn't rush forward. He didn't shout. He simply stood straight, his posture shifting from a janitor to a lead coordinator in a split second. The change in his energy was so sudden it was as if he had physically grown larger. He spoke with a resonant, grounding baritone that seemed to vibrate the very water in the crystal glasses on the table. "That's not what he actually said," Nathan stated. The room went deathly silent. It was the kind of silence that happens when a mirror breaks at a funeral. Victoria Langford froze. She slowly turned her head, her eyes landing on the man in the blue uniform holding a mop. She looked at him as if he were a ghost that had just gained a voice. The board members looked confused, then annoyed, then curious. Marcus, the translator, let out an incredulous, high-pitched laugh. "Excuse me. Nathan, go back to the lobby. You're interrupting a global summit. This is a technical negotiation involving complex maritime law and liability, not a floor-waxing schedule. You're out of line. Security, please. Nathan didn't look at Marcus. He didn't even acknowledge the insult. He kept his gaze locked on Victoria. He saw the desperation hidden behind her cold-hearted mask. He saw the girl who wanted to be a builder, just like he had once been. Sir Tanaka didn't say they were unwilling to proceed, Nathan explained, his voice calm, clinical, and unshakable. He used a very specific, polite conditional that is common in the southern provinces. He said they are currently unable to move forward because they are waiting for a clarification on the regional labor safety standards for their dock workers. It wasn't a refusal of the contract, it was a request for more data. He isn't closing the door, Victoria. He's standing on the threshold waiting for you to invite him in with a better safety plan. If you close the call now, you aren't being decisive, you're being blind. Victoria's brow furrowed. She looked at the screen, then back at Nathan. She was a woman of logic, and right now the logic was being pulled in two directions. On one side was a high-paid certified professional in a $5,000 suit. On the other side was a man who emptied her trash. But Nathan's eyes, they weren't the eyes of a janitor. They were the eyes of a man who had seen the world and wasn't afraid of it. In communication, the most dangerous mistake isn't a lack of words, but a lack of context. People often hear what they expect to hear, rather than what is actually being said. A single incorrectly understood word can change the trajectory of a life, or a legacy. True intelligence is the ability to hear the silence between the words. Truth doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it carries a mop. The atmosphere in the boardroom was no longer just tense. It was electrified. Marcus, the translator, was turning a deep shade of crimson. He slammed his leather folder onto the table. Victoria, this is absurd. Are we really going to let the cleaning staff dictate our international strategy? This man is a custodian. He probably learned a few phrases from a travel app or a girlfriend and thinks he's an expert. I've been certified for 15 years. I've translated for prime ministers. Victoria didn't answer Marcus. She kept her gaze locked on Nathan. She noticed the way he was balanced on his feet, relaxed but ready. She noticed the way his hands gripped the mop handle, not with tension, but with a comfortable familiarity. She saw a level of integrity and presence that she hadn't seen in any of her vice presidents. She realized that Nathan wasn't trying to be right. He was just being truthful. Check the phrasing, Marcus, Victoria commanded. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was a gavel. Rewatch the last 20 seconds of the digital recording. Look at Tanaka's hands when he mentioned the liability clause. Look at the way he touched his lapel. Marcus scoffed, but he complied, his fingers shaking as he rewound the digital playback. The board members leaned in, staring at the screen. Mr. Tanaka spoke again, the rhythmic, soft syllables filling the room. Nathan spoke up before Marcus could open his mouth, his voice carrying the authority of a lead analyst. He uses the word "mada," followed by a soft aspiration, Nathan pointed out. In this specific regional context, it's a not yet, not a never. He also used the honorific for worker protection. He is waiting for you to address the safety protocol for the subcontractors. If you offer him the safety audit now, the one your team prepared last week but decided was too expensive to include, he'll sign the agreement before the end of the hour. He wants the deal, Victoria. He just needs to know his people are safe. Victoria turned back to the video screen. She cleared her throat and spoke directly to Mr. Tanaka, bypassing her translator for the first time. She used a few basic phrases she knew, her voice trembling slightly, then switched back to English, presenting the specific labor safety clarification Nathan had suggested. The reaction from the screen was instantaneous. It was like watching a sunrise. Mr. Tanaka's posture changed. He leaned forward, a genuine, wide smile spreading across his face. He nodded vigorously and spoke a long, rhythmic sentence that didn't need a dictionary to understand. It was relief. It was agreement. It was the sound of a bridge being crossed. Tanaka's own assistant then spoke in clear English. Yes, Ms. Langford. That was the missing piece. Our chairman is very traditional. He believes the safety of the workers is the soul of the company. We were worried about the protection of our site crews under the New York liability laws. If you include that specific audit clause, our chairman is authorized to sign immediately. Thank you for your deep understanding of our core values. We are honored to be your partners. The deal was done. A $300 million contract that supported 5,000 jobs across 2 continents was saved in a vacuum of silence. The board members stared at Nathan as if he had just turned lead into gold. The freeze moment hit the room like a cold front. It was the moment they realized that the man they had been ignoring for years was the only one in the room who actually knew how to communicate. They looked at their expensive watches, their Oxford degrees, and their high-status titles, and then they looked at Nathan's mop bucket. The math wasn't adding up in their heads. They had spent millions on consultants, and the answer was sitting in the corner with a bottle of lemon cleaner. Marcus, the translator, didn't wait for a formal dismissal. He grabbed his bag and walked out of the room, his face pale with a burning public shame. He had been exposed not by a rival firm, but by the help. He had been translating words while Nathan had been translating a soul. Victoria Langford stood at the head of the table. She didn't join the board members who were now cheering and shaking hands. She walked around the mahogany table, her heels clicking slowly on the marble until she was standing 3 feet from Nathan. She looked at him with a mixture of awe and profound, heavy regret. "You aren't a janitor, Nathan," Victoria said softly. It wasn't a question anymore. Nathan gave a small, humble shrug, his hands returning to the handle of his mop. The master was retreating, and the janitor was coming back. "I am today, ma'am, and I believe the coffee spill near the window is still waiting for me. We wouldn't want the marble to stain." "Who are you?" she asked, her eyes searching his for the truth he had hidden for 3 years. No one understands that specific Southern regional nuance without years of high-level interaction. "Where did you come from? Why are you here?" "I'm just a dad, Victoria," Nathan replied quietly, his voice regaining its weary, steady rhythm. "And I'm a dad who is currently 5 minutes behind on my cleaning schedule. If there's nothing else, I really should finish the floor. The sun is coming up, and your executive team will be here soon for the signing ceremony. It should be perfect for them." He went back to mopping. The wolf pack of executives stood in a circle of absolute silence, watching the man in the blue uniform move with a purposeful, rhythmic grace. They realized then that they had just witnessed the most expensive and profound lesson of their careers. That value is not something you demand with a title. It is something you carry in your presence. The foundation had spoken, and the skyscraper would never look the same to them again. The most impactful moments in life don't always come from the people we expect to lead. They come from the people who are brave enough to speak the truth when the room is silent. Real power isn't about being in the meeting. It's about being the person who understands the frequency of the truth, regardless of the uniform they wear. Accuracy doesn't care about your salary. It only cares about the truth. The meeting ended, and the board members filtered out, whispering frantically about the redemption janitor. Victoria stayed behind. She sat in her leather chair, looking at the logic diagrams Nathan had sketched on a discarded notepad during the brief pause in the deal. They were more precise than her lead strategist's notes. They were elegant. They were the work of a master architect. She called her HR director at 9 a.m. sharp. "I want the full personnel file for Nathan Cole. Everything, not just the background check. I want the history. Find out where he worked before he came to Vanguard. Go back 20 years if you have to." An hour later, the report arrived. As Victoria scrolled through the encrypted data, the breath left her lungs. She saw the military service in signals intelligence. She saw the master's degree in global linguistics and cultural anthropology. Most of all, she saw his previous role as a lead coordinator for an international crisis management group, where he had negotiated hostage releases and aid corridors in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. He was known in the community as the bridge builder. She realized then that Nathan hadn't been hiding because he had failed. He had been hiding because he had chosen a different kind of success. He was a father who had walked away from the sky to be on the ground for his child. Victoria walked down to the maintenance bay in the basement. She had never been to the basement in her 2 years as CEO. It was a world of concrete, steam pipes, and the smell of industrial soap. It was the city's foundations. She found Nathan sitting on a metal bench, eating a simple ham sandwich. He looked up, not with the predatory gaze of an employee looking for a promotion, but with the quiet, humble curiosity of a student. I read your file, Nathan, Victoria began, her voice echoing in the cold space. Then you know I'm overqualified for the mop, Nathan replied with a faint, tired smile. But I'm not overqualified for being a dad. That's the only job I'm currently failing at if I don't get home by 3 to help Ivy with her science project. How did you catch that translation error? Victoria asked, sitting on the bench next to him, ignoring the dust on her $1,000 skirt. Marcus has been with us for 5 years. He's supposed to be the best in the city. The tone didn't match the words, Nathan said simply. Communication is only 10% vocabulary, Victoria. The rest is rhythm, posture, and the way a person breathes between the sentences. Tanaka was leaning in, not pulling away. His voice had a harmonic quality that suggested he was looking for a connection. Marcus was looking for a fight to prove his own dominance. When you're looking for a fight, you'll always find one, even in a compliment. Marcus was translating his own arrogance, not the partner's intent. A floor manager walked by, stopping to stare in shock at the CEO sitting on a maintenance bench. Nathan didn't flinch. You should have said something sooner, Nathan, the manager barked, trying to assert authority in front of the boss. You let that meeting drag on for 3 hours while the clock was ticking. Nathan looked the manager in the eye, his gaze as steady as a horizon line. I wasn't part of the meeting, sir. I was part of the maintenance crew. In a building with 2,000 people, you learn to stay in your lane unless the bridge is about to collapse. Today, the bridge was about to collapse, so I stepped out of the lane. Victoria stood up, her face resolute. She looked at the invisible man and saw a giant. I want you to be our director of strategic communication and cultural integrity. We're building a new department to handle our international partnerships and internal culture. You report directly to me. Your schedule is your own. If you need to be at the school gate at 3, then the meetings happen at 10. No exceptions. Nathan looked at his sandwich, then at Victoria. He shook his head slowly, a quiet wisdom in his eyes. I appreciate the offer, Victoria. Truly. But I moved to the basement for a reason. I don't want the 60-hour weeks. I don't want the boardrooms or the silk ties. I like the silence of the early morning. It's 30 hours a week, she countered. Full remote flexibility. And I want you to mentor our young negotiators so they stop looking at the dictionaries and start looking at the people across the table. You saved this company $300 million and 5,000 jobs today. I'm not asking you to come back to the sky for the ego, Nathan. I'm asking you to help us build a better foundation. Help us be the company that actually listens. Many people stay silent not because they lack knowledge, but because they understand the boundaries of their roles. We often lose the most valuable perspectives because we have created a system that only allows certain people to speak. Real leadership is the ability to walk down into the basement to find the person who knows how to fix the roof. A true voice doesn't need a stage, it just needs a listener who is willing to hear. The following Monday, the atmosphere at Vanguard Global was fundamentally different. There was no internal memo about a new executive hire. There was no press release for the trade journals. But a man in a simple gray sweater and clean dark trousers was sitting in the back of the morning strategy meeting. He didn't have a nameplate, and he didn't have a title on the door. Nathan Cole was still the same quiet man. He still listened more than he talked. But now when he raised his hand or cleared his throat, the entire boardroom stopped breathing. The VPs, the lawyers, and the analysts who used to walk right through him now waited for his nod. They had learned a multi-million-dollar lesson, that the most important person in the room might be the one you didn't even notice. They started to look at the cleaning crew differently. They started to see the people, not the uniforms. After the meeting ended at 2 p.m., Nathan closed his laptop. He didn't linger to network or drink expensive scotch with the board members who were eager for his approval. He walked toward the elevators, offering a polite, genuine nod to the new night cleaner who was just starting his shift near the lobby. The marble looks good today, Bill, Nathan said with a smile that reached his eyes. Thanks, Mr. Cole, the man replied, looking a bit surprised. I heard you used to do this. Is it true? I did, Nathan replied, his eyes reflecting the afternoon sun. It's the best way to see the truth of a building. You learn where the weight is really being carried. As Nathan walked out of the glass tower into the New York air, he felt a profound sense of peace. The Ice Queen. Victoria had kept her word. He reached the school gates at exactly 3 p.m. Ivy was there, her face lighting up like a lighthouse when she saw him. She was waving her new drawing, a picture of a big building with a tiny dad at the top, holding a giant mop that looked like a royal scepter. At the bottom of the page, in her neat 10-year-old handwriting, were the words, "My dad hears the things other people are too loud to notice. He's the guardian of the truth." True value isn't found in a title, a corner office, or a bank account. It's found in the courage to be seen for who you are, and the wisdom to know what actually matters when the lights go out. Nathan Cole was home, and for the first time in 5 years, the frequency was absolutely perfect. He was no longer invisible, but he was exactly where he wanted to be, in the light of his daughter's pride. True understanding is not found in a dictionary, but in the attention we give to others. A person's value is not defined by the uniform they wear or the authority they hold, but by the integrity of their actions and the depth of their commitment to the truth. Never underestimate the quietest person in the room. They might be the only one who knows the way home. Real communication is a bridge of the heart, not just a sequence of words. If you believe the smallest voice can change everything, subscribe for more stories like this, and tell me in the comments, would you have spoken up or stayed silent? Have you ever found a master in the shadows of your life?